This budget supports that.
Andrew Dickel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pleasure to speak on the Appropriations Bill, or the 2012 budget. So whatever this budget is a future for, it's not a budget for the future of New Zealand. It is miserly, it is penny pinching, and it offers nothing for future wealth creation and future wealth building for New Zealand. What we've seen in this budget, the headline issues for this budget are tax on paper boys. We've seen shifting the goalposts for elderly in their retirement and the support they get for their retirement homes. We've seen more cuts in frontline services, and we've seen a lot of rhetoric accompanying the budget saying how wonderful it is for the future of New Zealand. It is all Alice in Wonderland stuff. It is head in the sand stuff. It's out of touch. But the education changes that were announced in this budget, or rather not announced but presumed and implied, are something else again. And let's recount what happened in relation to those education announcements, those education changes. The Treasury Secretary was deployed for the softening up process. So he gave the interview and he gave the speech that signalled that class size wasn't the issue, and that there would be provision or changes in the budget and changes in financing for education. Nobody knew what was happening. No signal was given about the precise changes. And what has become quite apparent since the delivery of the budget is that if Cabinet Ministers knew, or even if some of them knew, none asked the question. None reminded or told their colleagues about what the impact was going to be on the schools and their electorates and the schools around the country. No one asked the question. And the sector itself didn't know until the day before, or even the day of the budget. I've met intermediate school principals who did not know what the impact was going to be until the morning of the budget. That's the closely guarded secret that this was. So the education changes in the budget were much less Alice in Wonderland and more malice in Blunderland. That's what that was about. Budget 2012 offers nothing for the future of New Zealand. Where in the budget is the foundation for future wealth creation? Where is the acceptance of the real and very serious and difficult problems facing New Zealand on, for example, superannuation financing and funding? What we do have from this government and their economic and finance policy is selling, or partially selling, state-owned enterprises, the state assets. A policy that we know is shortchanging New Zealand in the long term. Even the Treasury, in its more honest moments, tells us that what will be yielded for, in terms of a sale price for those state assets, will not make up for the return that the government gets on those in the longer term. So, and we're not just selling state assets, now we're down to selling policy. So when it comes to gambling and when it comes to a convention centre in Auckland, we will fund that through selling policy. So now, if ever there was a matter that was a case of malice and blunderland, surely it must be ACC. And I want to take a few moments to talk about the ACC issue, because this is serious. Because ACC is a very important institution in this country. 38 years old this year, it has been fundamental to good health and safety, to good rehabilitation and recovery for injured workers and for injured people. And it is very important. It has long held a high degree of public trust and confidence. Its genesis was in a bipartisan decision of this Parliament to say that something had to change to provide for those who were injured by accident. It is unbelievable that many members opposite, in their speeches on the budget so far in this debate, have referred to the wonderful ACC reforms engendered by this government. So I want to talk about some of those ACC reforms, because what we have now is this important New Zealand institution, its reputation in tatters, and all because of the approach this government has taken in relation to ACC. The rot started under the previous minister. One of the biggest political cons of a generation is when this government announced and declared and persuaded everybody that ACC was in financial crisis. Never mind that for nearly 10 years ACC had been generating surpluses of $1 billion. Never mind that at that time it had reserves of nearly $11 billion. it announced that there was a financial crisis. And so it got rid of many board members and installed its specially recruited chairman, John Judge, who now is no longer, at least on the ACC board. It recruited John Judge. It hiked up the levies totally unnecessarily. And when I got a backlash from the bikies, whose bikes they couldn't crush, it then had to backtrack at least on that part of it. But it hiked up the levies. And what has the impact of that been? What has the impact of that been? Well, up till about 2008, 2009, ACC generated surpluses of about $1 billion. It used to spend about $2.5 to $3 billion on looking after people, on paying for their medical treatment and medical costs, on paying their compensation. Well, you know what happened last year, Mr. Speaker? What happened last year is that ACC produced a surplus of $3.5 billion. And you know what they spent on looking after people? You know what they spent on the medical treatment and care of people and the compensation? $2.9 billion. They generated a surplus greater than what they spent on every claimant who needed medical care and treatment, who needed earnings-related compensation. That's what they did. They were so embarrassed about it. They were so embarrassed about it that just before the election, lo and behold, they announced a reduction in the levies. That's how embarrassed they were about their big mistake. But the mistake didn't stop there. Oh, they'll never apologise about it. They'll never apologise about it because this is a government that, according to their own operations manual, does no wrong. They do no wrong, apart from Nick Smith. Nick Smith did admit that he did wrong, and he did the honourable thing, and he stood down. But no other minister has done the same thing. But that wasn't the end of their ACC reforms. They put John Judge in for a reason. They wanted to shake the corporation up. They wanted to get into a program of cost cutting, penny pinching, miserliness, and they wanted to push back on legitimate claimants, people who had been injured. Through no fault of their own, they pushed back. And one of those people happened to be one of their own, Bronwyn Pula, aided and abetted by another one of their own, Michelle Bode. And, of course, fury, there is no fury, at least hell hath no fury, like an ACC claimant who is a member of the National Party scorned. And that is what happened. So what we had, the ACC reforms promoted by this government, is get rid of a good board and a good chair, hike up the levies unnecessarily, declare there is a financial crisis, get into a dreadful program of penny pinching and cost cutting, and push back on legitimate claimants who are suffering, who are in pain, who are just doing what every New Zealander has done for the last 38 years, and look to ACC for help and support, and create a culture of disentitlement, and then cut back on those things that are needed to manage your personal information needs carefully. Now we have an organisation whose reputation is in tatters, where privacy breaches are endemic, where people are getting knocked back, are suffering, are exasperated, are distressed and depressed because of what this government's ACC reforms have done. And the question is, where is the minister on this? Where is the minister on this? What has she done? In the House today, when asked what she had done, what her actions were, she told us what everybody else had done. But what has she done? So her challenge now is, having got rid of John Judge, is to issue a new set of instructions. Forget what the last minister said, forget what Nick Smith said, and issue a new set of instructions. And unfortunately, she has to issue them to Paula Rebstock. So we don't know how much change there's going to be for this. But here's the challenge to the minister. Issue a new set of instructions. Tell your new board chair that we want an ACC that cares about the people who come to it for help and support. Look after those people. Examine the claims, but look after those people. And make sure that nobody who is entitled to support and assistance from ACC is disentitled, is rejected, is denied, is thrown out in the cold, is left to battle the behemoth of ACC on their own, as so many are at the moment. Issue a new instruction. Say we want a culture change and make a difference, because never has a very important public institution in New Zealand that is so important to the life of New Zealand and the life of New Zealanders come under such sustained attack from the people to whom it is so important. and never has a public institution come under such sustained neglect from the Minister who was responsible for it. So that is the challenge, sir, and I look forward to this government doing something new and good for ACC, because that'll be a change in the past 3.5 years.
Louise Hupston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm very proud to stand and take a call in